Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is a fantastic and gripping short story by the incredible DoomDragon682. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I used to work for a login company. Let's get straight into that. I used to work for a logging company. It was a pretty good job. The pay was good and it was nice to spend time out in the mountains. I made pretty good friends with the other workers and we'd sit together during lunch breaks occasionally and talk about sports and politics. Usually whenever I got the chance I spent my time alone in the woods, usually on walks or eating my lunch on a stump. I guess you could say it was ironic, a guy who loves nature working for a logging company. But really, most companies aren't as evil as people would believe. We make sure to only take trees from a marked area, and the areas we took trees from usually didn't have many animals. We even planted some new trees after we were done. Although one day, as we were working, I noticed something. A few of the trees that we had cut, they had been marked, and we were taking trees from outside our acre of land. I went to discuss this with the foreman, and he told me we had to start up in production. And when I asked him why, he gave some half-assed line about increased demand and corporate changes, all while looking at his shiny new Rolex. Well, that definitely got on my nerves. I left to go clear my head in a forest. I didn't like logging outside the marked area. It's that kind of greed that's going to end up destroying the forest around us. And pretty soon there won't be anything left. And so I sat on a log and began to contemplate on what, if anything, I could do. And soon my thoughts were disturbed by a voice. It sounded old and tired and reminded me of a creaking wood. Good evening. As I looked around to find the source of the voice, my eyes fell onto an old man. And I mean old. The guy looked ancient. He had a long grey beard that fell past his chest and his face was wrinkled and weathered from time, though his eyes were still as bright blue that shimmered with intelligence and something else I couldn't place. He wore a friendly smile and I saw he was wearing an old thick shirt and pants, and I saw he wasn't wearing shoes. The next thing I noticed was a twig sticking out of his hair and stuck to his clothing. I replied politely, "Evening, sir. What brings you here?" No, it wasn't unheard of for people to wander on our sites. They usually just asked for directions or complained about us being evil. Well, this guy didn't look like that type though. He looked like an old man who was lost in the woods. And maybe he was homeless. Either way, I didn't see any reason to be unjustly rude and run him off. I moved to the side and offered him a seat next to me, which he took. And when he sat, I could have sworn I heard his bones creak. I was probably just the wind in the trees. He sat there for a moment, as though taking in the calm and the air, before he spoke. "Well, I was out on a stroll when I noticed you sitting out here and scowling, and I figured something must have been wrong for you to be angry on such a fine day in such a lovely part of the woods." The old man spoke in a very friendly, happy-go-lucky tone, and it put me at ease. At least he wasn't deranged or anything, though I also chuckled a bit at what he said. "Where things go on in this part of the woods, we won't be here much longer." He turned to me at that with a slight look of confusion and, I thought, a hint of anger. "Well, why is that?" "I know you lumberjacks are working near here, but isn't this spot off limits?" Well, I was surprised at this. I guess he knew about the work we were doing here. He must have seen the marked trees. Maybe he used to work for a logging company a while back, though it's been a while since anyone called us lumberjacks. I debated telling him what was going on, but eventually I figured it probably wouldn't hurt. Hell, if anything, I hoped he'd tell the papers. Maybe that would knock some sense into the foreman. I explained the situation, how my boss was getting greedy and logging outside the marked area, and pretty soon this whole grove, it would be gone. The old man sat in silence for a moment, and then eventually he stood and puffed out his chest. "Well, that just won't do." He stood and began marching towards our worksite. I stood and hurried after him. For an old man, he sure moved quick. I planned on stopping him before he made it to the site. The last thing I needed was an old man yelling at my foreman, and my foreman getting pissed at me for telling him what was going on. But suddenly, I stopped. Where had the old man gone? I had taken my eyes off him for a moment to make sure I didn't trip over a root, and when I looked back, he was completely gone. Not so much as a footprint left. In the spot where I thought I had last seen him, there was just a large oak tree. Had I imagined him? If that was the case, then I had a whole new set of issues. That's when I heard the screams. I was used to hearing people shout when a tree fell or if something went wrong, but these screams of panic and terror. I bolted through the trees for the site as fast as I could and came to a scene of pure madness. The forest was attacking. That's the only way I can think to describe what I saw. Tree limbs lashed out at men running for cover, clawing at them with bare branches and knocking them to the ground. Vines wrapped around one man's neck and dragged him into the foliage. You heard his screams come to an abrupt halt soon after. Another man fell into a thick bush, and I heard the sound of flesh tearing as the branches tore at his body and forced their way in through his ears, nose, mouth, and even eyes. They continued until there was nearly nothing left of him. I saw the foreman making a mad dash for one of the pickup trucks. I was rooted to the spot as he passed over a man slowly being dragged into the ground by the roots of the stump. He kicked the man's flailing legs away and made it to the truck. He got in, and as soon as the engine started, he floored the gas. I heard the sound of tires struggling. Roots and grass were wrapping around them, preventing any movement. And then I heard another sound. It was a massive thudding sound accompanied by a deep groaning noise. A giant stepped into the clearing. It seemed to be made completely out of vegetation. I saw its thick limbs were covered in hard bark and roots covered them like muscle and sinew. Its head. It was a thick mass of leaves that took the shape of the thick beard and wild hair. I recognized it as the old man, though now his eyes were green, an unnatural green, as though you had concentrated the greenest meadow of forest and split it into two orbs. It took heavy, lumbering steps towards the foreman's truck and made it there just as the foreman threw the door open and fell out. He tried to crawl away, but the old man, or whatever he was, grabbed the foreman by the leg. He screamed in a way that I have never expected to hear from a man of his size as the giant lifted him into the air. He flailed and struggled, and I expected the thing to crush him or tear him in half. Instead, it hugged him. And then, as I watched petrified, it slowly began to grow around him. Vines and bark encompassed his body as he slowly melted into the giant's body. Eventually, his screams became muffled and then silent. The giant lowered its arms and looked at me. I was afraid that I was next when, suddenly, he gave me a friendly smile. I blinked a few times, still trying to comprehend what I had just seen, when the giant turned and lumbered into the trees. I looked around, expecting to be surrounded by an utter bloodbath, but was surprised to see the clearing was utterly peaceful. No sign of an attack at all, not so much as a drop of blood on a leaf. I stood silently for a minute before I radioed another team. I didn't know what to say, so I told them I came back from lunch to find everyone was gone. The police were called, but there was no sign of any of the men. I was a suspect, but there was no evidence of me doing anything. They also had no idea of how one man could kill and dispose of so many people, and so it was dropped. I don't know if they ever came to some kind of conclusion or if they just decided that it couldn't be solved. I quit my job after that. Got a nice home in the countryside, near a state park. It's a pretty peaceful life. I've got a dog and the two of us go on walks every day. I've been talking with a nice woman I see in town. I even got a new career as a park ranger. I never really forgot what happened that day though. And the reason I'm writing this is because I was on a patrol the other day when I came across something. A tree. Now this might surprise you, but in a state park there are lots of trees. And what surprised me was what was in the tree. A Rolex watch. It had been weathered by time and was no longer as shiny as when I last saw it, but I knew it. It was the same watch. I stood and stared for a while before turning and walking back to my station. Have you ever heard of the Green Man? He's an old pagan god of nature, a guardian of the forest. He's supposed to be benevolent, not harmful most of the time, but he's still a god. And gods are unpredictable, especially one as ancient as the world itself. As I'm writing this, I looked up and out of my window and saw something that made me pause. The branches outside my window looked oddly like a smiling face of an old man. I'm not scared. I don't think he means harm, though I did hear that another logging crew went missing recently. My only real hope is that they deserved it. Maybe they were moving out of their territory, like mine. Well, I'll choose that because the alternative sends shivers down my spine. Wow. Another one. Wow. Absolutely wonderful. Intriguing and creepy story there from the fantastic DoomDragon682. Thank you ever so much, buddy, for allowing me to narrate your story on the show. I do hope you enjoyed my narration, and I really do look forward to more of your work in the future. Of course, guys and girls, please do take a second to click the link of which I'll leave in the description box below. That'll take you over to DoomDragon's Reddit profile, smash an upvote and possibly leave a nice comment. It really does help them build a presence as a writer on the platform. Of course, as ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. Of course, if you're an aspiring writer or just fancy having a crack at things, why not send over your story to my usual email address as on screen, which is dmtforustofear@gmail.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you're all well and happy, guys, keeping fit and focused as possible during these testing times. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.